We soon expect disgraced attorney Alex Murdaugh to be sentenced after a jury found him guilty of murdering his wife and his son after deliberating for just 3 hours. The case that's really dominated headlines across the world. The murders, they've been the subject of podcasts and even several documentaries. Joining us now, though, to break this down is former federal prosecutor Neama Rahmani with some insight into the jury's pretty swift verdict and some answers as to what happens next. Thanks for being with us. Good morning.
Good morning, Seth. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I want to know, are you stunned, and with your experience, with your background, are you surprised that the jury came back with a verdict so quickly? Was it the juxtaposition against the weekend and they did not want to elongate it? Or was it just that the evidence was so compelling?
I was surprised, Seth. And, normally juries tend to deliberate approximately an hour or so for each day of witness testimony. This was a 28-day trial. So if they came back this afternoon on a Friday before the weekend, that wouldn't be surprising. But to return a guilty verdict so quickly in less than 3 hours, I mean, the evidence was strong, but it certainly wasn't overwhelming. And based on some of the juror interviews so far, it looks like the original count was 9 guilty, 2 not guilty, and 1 decided during that first hour. So within a couple of hours, they were able to convince those holdout jurors and return a unanimous guilty verdict.
Yeah, that's a quick timeline that they had. We know one of the jurors was removed and had to be replaced with an alternate after the judge said that she had been discussing something about her case. Do you think that gave any of the attorneys concern that this could screw up their arguments at all?
Well, potentially, when that alternate was removed, there was only 1 alternate remaining. And of course, you need 12. So if this deliberation continued through next week, and if the jury happened to lose 2 more jurors, there would be a significant problem and a potential mistrial unless the parties could agree to a jury of less than 12. So it's certainly an issue. And of course, that juror famously brought a dozen eggs into the jury box.
Now, it's rare for a murder suspect to testify in their own trial, but here you have Murdaugh, a trial lawyer with more than 2 decades of experience. He knows how to talk to a jury. Was he too haughty in his decision to testify, thinking that he could do himself a favor, or do you think that worked against him?
Well, it worked against him, and he testified poorly. Really, the case was lost because of his testimony, and that's typical. When a criminal defendant testifies on his or her own behalf, the entire case will come down to their testimony. And in this case, Alex Murdaugh was neither likable nor credible. Of course, he was not likable because he admitted to stealing millions of dollars from clients. And he was not credible because he lied about where he was when his wife and son were killed. He told law enforcement that he was napping, but of course, during that infamous Snapchat video, it was clear that he was at the kennels, at the scene of the murders, and that's something that jurors hung their hat on.
Yeah, that's when he switched up his story and came clean about that. I'm wondering what happens next, though, because one of the cruxes of this case was the financial troubles that he was dealing with. You mentioned those millions of dollars. Could he still be prosecuted for those? Is it even worth it now?
I think so. A lot of folks will say, why is he going to be prosecuted? He's likely going to be sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, really in a matter of minutes. So what does that add? But, these are victims. They're very sympathetic victims. These are people who have been injured, who have lost loved ones. And Alex Murdaugh stole from them and stole a lot of money from them. So they're entitled to justice. They're entitled to their day in court and criminal restitution. So I would expect for prosecutors to charge Alex Murdaugh with those financial crimes because, again, those are serious crimes. And they really want to send a message to the Alex Murdaughs, the Tom Girardis of the world, that you cannot steal money from clients. So I do expect that case to move forward shortly.
And will his admissions during this case play into that? Does it make it easier for the other prosecutors?
Oh, very easy, Seth. That case is going to be a slam dunk. I mean, Murdaugh admitted to committing all sorts of crimes under oath, under penalty of perjury, while on the witness stand. So, and they do have some arguments on appeal in the murder case. So that's one more reason why I think, prosecutors will take a belt and suspenders approach. I don't expect the verdict to be overturned, but there's some arguments that an appellate court might look at. That's why prosecutors will move forward with the financial fraud cases as well.
Interesting. That video that you mentioned, the Snapchat video that showed him near the kennels, When he switched up on on his story, what he admitted was the truth, which was different from what he originally said. Do you think that was the aha moment for most of the jurors?
It was, Seth. It's really that smoking gun. I mean, it's a bad pun, but I mean, that was the evidence that the jury relied on because look, is someone who's innocent, do they lie to law enforcement, right? So, and the defense didn't have a good argument to explain the lie. They said that, you know, Alex Murdaugh was addicted to opioids and he was paranoid and he was distrustful of law enforcement. But like you said, this is someone who's a very sophisticated attorney, been practicing for many years. He's not someone that should have those fears of law enforcement. So the jurors asked themselves, is this someone who is innocent, who lost his wife and his son, or is this someone who's guilty and is trying to cover his tracks? And they believe the latter.
Very interesting. Well, thank you for coming on. Neama Rahmani, the president of West Coast Trial Lawyers, thank you for breaking this down with your experience, and we appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.